make sure that that program doesn't contain controversial subjects, and you're not impolite to people.
No, definitely not, Dad. You know me. I'm never, ever controversial or impolite.
Yeah. Okay.
Welcome to Conversations with your lovable, never pisses anyone off, never been banned from Facebook or YouTube, never been sabotaged or censored for politely expressing a difference of opinion, ex-Muslim host Aina, keeping it non-controversial. Welcome to episode 28. I have Pakistani-Canadian writer here with me today, Hina Husain. She wrote a particularly interesting piece for Vice that caught my eye recently, titled, "I Gave My Mom Shrooms So She Would Open Up About My Father's Death." Hi, Hina. How are you doing?
Hi, I'm doing okay. If my voice sounds a little nasally, I'm just recovering from a flu, so forgive me.
Oh, no. I hope you feel better soon. But thanks so much for coming on. This is such a fascinating story, especially coming from, a Pakistani perspective. It's like, I don't know, it hits so many chords with me. Like, I've never given my parents drugs. But, we've joked about it. Me and my siblings were like, can you imagine if, at this Eid party, we, made magic brownies and just served them? It'd be so funny. We always joke about that stuff, but you actually did it.
I actually did it. And I had a couple of people reach out to me after the article went up, and they're like, oh my God, you drugged your mom and you didn't ask for her consent or anything like that. And that's not exactly, I thought about that too, where I'm like, I'll just slip it in her chai and, she wouldn't know, and then she'll just open up. And I wouldn't do that because they don't know what's happening to them. And then most likely they'll have a bad trip. And that's not what I wanted. I wanted my mom to kind of know, that she was going to experience some stuff and it might be new and unknown to her, and that it was okay. But if I just drugged her, I wouldn't have had the ability to give her that caveat. So right. I thought about that too, where I'm like, just put it in her, biryani or something, and
well, I mean, just to say, when we talk about it, me and my siblings or me and my cousins, we're always just joking. Nobody's actually going to do it. It's just what if? Imagine how wild this boring ass Eid party could get. Yeah. Even if there was just booze there, man, that's a whole other podcast. How boring Desi dinner parties are,
and weddings, and
weddings.
I totally feel you.
Torture. But yeah, so to go on about your mom, so you made sure she knew what was going on. You said that she didn't realize it was illegal, though, right?
That's the only information I withheld. I was like, I'm going to give you, this thing that you're going to eat that's, totally organic and it's going to make you feel funky, and it's going to, you might want to talk and you might want to, share some stuff, and that's totally okay. The only information I withheld was that I was giving her an illegal substance. That's pretty much it.
That probably wouldn't have helped with a good trip either, right?
Oh my God. She would have probably been the way I was the first time I did mushrooms. It was oh my God, the police, they know
yeah.
I took this thing. They're going to come through that door right now and I'm going to be arrested, so I didn't want her experiencing that.
So I'm surprised though that she said okay to it. How did that go down? I can't imagine my parents saying yes to that.
My mom and I, we had quite a strained relationship for a couple of years after my father's death because, for a bunch of different reasons. My father was, I was estranged from him. I hadn't spoken to him in a few years before he died, and then he died. And then, my mom, she kind of had her own, she wanted to take priority, her grief and her sadness was above everyone else's. And then, whenever, we did talk to her, all she wanted to say were these things about how she wants to die and, how, we don't love her anymore and we don't need her anymore. And, I was suffering a lot in the sense that I couldn't share my grief with my mother about what I had experienced. So it was better for me to just kind of go off on my own and kind of deal with it on my own. And that made things worse for my mom because now she was that was proof for her that I didn't need her anymore because I was abandoning her and stuff. So things with my mom hadn't been amazing up until that point. So when I gave her the shrooms, I think she also realized on some level, though I don't think she was in a position to communicate it, that, we needed something to help us bridge that gap. So when I recommended, let's try something and it'll help our relationship, I think she was open to that idea because she knew that our relationship needed some help.
Mm-hmm. And I guess she's very open-minded in certain ways.
Yes. Oh, yeah. My mom, she's pretty open-minded. She's, a couple of other people who I shared this story with before I wrote it up. So this actually happened in fall of 2015. So the September is not this past September. It's the September before. So I shared the story with some people afterwards verbally, and they were like, I'm having a hard time believing it because people have a certain idea of what a Pakistani Desi brown woman is, you know, like what they look like, what they, how they behave, what kind of life they live, how they dress, so on and so forth. So I think people pictured that kind of a woman when I spoke about my mom, and my mom is not like that. She's, she looks very young for her age. She's very well maintained. She's not, like dupatta and shalwar kameez and cooking at home all the time. Like, she's not that kind of a woman. So I understand the difficulty.
And by dupatta and shalwar kameez, you're just referring to the, the national outfit. Yeah. I'm just clarifying for people who don't speak Urdu. But yeah, I totally relate to that. My mom too. She's always been very modern and open-minded, but I don't think I could convince her to do shrooms. Yeah. But
I don't think my mom would have done shrooms had my dad been alive. And that's the thing I'm very upfront with. I don't think the family dynamic that I have now with my mother and the rest of my family and the way my family lives now, I don't think any of that would have been possible had my dad been alive. And I think for a lot of people, they don't realize the very significant role the father or the husband of the family plays in keeping the family conservative or traditional. And because my father died, my family could break away from that, traditional shell. Yeah. I won't hide the fact that had he been alive, none of this probably would have happened.
And you mentioned that he was abusive as well to her, right? Mm-hmm. So I guess there were so many elements at play there, keeping her in a shell. And all of a sudden, she was free to discover who she was, I imagine. And how did that trip go down? How was it? I know you described it in the article, but talking to you is going to be more descriptive, I imagine. So tell me a bit about that.
There were a lot of things in the article that I just couldn't write because of time and just space. But she ended up crying, but not crying in the sense that she was sobbing. It was like she was talking and there were tears streaming down her face, but at the same time she had a smile and she was, I think she was, a lot of her emotions that she hadn't dealt with were kind of coming out, and she couldn't compartmentalize them. So, we were at the Starbucks, and she was really worried that people were going to look at her and they were going to tell that she was crying. And I had to kind of convince her. I'm like, Mom, nobody gives a shit. Like, nobody cares. Like, you can feel whatever you want. You can experience whatever you wanted. And she needed to hear that, because it was only after she heard that she was comfortable kind of crying and talking and expressing the whole breadth of emotion that was, kind of underlying her experience around my father's death. And not just that, but her whole life, she started from the very, very start, her childhood and her parents and their marriage and her siblings and the kind of environment that she grew up in. And so it was a lot not just for me to hear, but even for her to kind of unload,
you opened like some kind of floodgate of emotions, because typically Pakistanis are taught to control their emotions. And, you write a really good sentence on that. We're taught that weakness is unattractive, that you should never truly open up to other people because they'll always use that information to put you down and ultimately hurt you, family included. I was taught this too, and the only reason I broke free from this toxic mentality was through experimenting with psychedelics. Now I want to help my mom do the same. So I think that nails it. I mean, people are always afraid that if they let themselves be too vulnerable, in Pakistani society, then someone else will use that information to humiliate them or blackmail them in some way. Like, oh, you told me that you're, having problems with your husband. Oh, well, let me humiliate you using this if you don't do what I want you to do. So I saw that kind of politics at play personally. So I know exactly what that culture is like. It's like a very gossip, just throw everyone under the bus to get what you want kind of culture. And I moved to Pakistan, like, from Saudi Arabia, like a very simple, there's no like sneaky underhanded, of course we have like sneaky underhanded people everywhere in every culture, but there's no like kind of cutthroat, street smart, protect yourself type of mentality that you have to develop. You just exist. Yeah. So when I was thrown into Pakistan, like as a teenager, like just for schooling for a couple of years, I had to really learn that really, really quickly because I was just honest and upfront about everything. I was like, oh yeah, I experimented with smoking cigarettes. And then everybody used that to blackmail me like I was such an idiot. So
it's a very judgmental society. And when you have women who have literally nothing to do with their lives, you're just expected to sit at home and, look nice for the guests that are going to come over and occasionally, cook. This is the sort of culture that develops when women are just, trophies for men to just sit at home and just do nothing with, just have idle minds and an idle time. So this sort of gossip culture develops around that lifestyle.
Yeah, also there's a lot of like luxury in like middle upper class Pakistani society, right? Even though it's a poor country, everyone has servants after a certain income level. People have drivers, people have, someone to come do the dishes, gardener. So people aren't really doing that much.
Yeah.
So yeah, I guess that lends itself to just
idleness, like not literally having nothing to do. And Pakistani society, I was just there for 10 days. I went back after 15 years. I was there last when I was like a 15-year-old little girl, and now I went back for the first time, and it's still the same. And I met people my age who I had gone to school with, and, they were married, and their biggest concerns were, oh my God, I've been married for a year and I'm not getting pregnant, and everybody's saying shit about that, like the expectation is that as soon as you get married, you got to produce a kid, within the first year. And it's not a very intellectual culture. There are, aspects of it. There are intellectuals, there are,
of course,
but general population, regular people, they're not really encouraged to read books or
it's very shallow. And I think that one part of that is explained obviously by poverty, right? So the people that can't afford basic things like education, food and stuff, obviously they're busy trying to get that. And then the people who can afford it, for some reason, they're more interested in things like, I don't know, how big your waist size is or how light your skin is. The more you can bleach it, the lighter it is. I don't know. Like,
I think the way
women are very commodified because they become like this product on the market, right? Like you have an expiration date. You can't hit like what? I don't know. Maybe the age has grown now, but at one point
it's still 30. It's still 30. If you're a woman and you're 30 and you're not married, God help you. You're lucky if somebody with like one limb will marry you. Like it's still like that.
I remember like being a teenager and just going to visit my grandma, and she'd be like, oh, you've been spending too much time at the swimming pool in Saudi Arabia. Look how dark you are. Who will marry you? And she'd like freak out. And that would it would piss me off because I'm like, I'm not really considering marriage at this point. First of all, that's not really my goal in life, that I'm going to preserve some sort of skin shade for a future husband. And secondly, what kind of an asshole would I be getting if he's only going to marry me based on how
your skin? When I was there, I realized I went there, as an adult for the first time with the self-awareness and the knowledge that I've accumulated living in Canada and the introspection I've experienced. And I went there with that, and I realized that what's happening there mostly is you're completely right. Poverty is a big thing. So, we have Maslow's hierarchy of needs.
Yeah.
There's 5 levels, right?
Exactly.
Most people they're stuck at level 1. They don't even have basic physical needs met. They don't know if they're going to be able to pay the bills next month, if their kids are going to be able to go to school, if they're going to be able to pay for tuition. And most people are on that level. You can't really expect them to self-actualize when they're on the first level. But,
yeah, exactly.
But the richer people, what I saw in them was that they had moved past that level. They had moved on to level 2, which is safety. And then because they were not on level 1, they felt that they had made it. They're like, because I'm not living in poverty, I have made it. They don't really realize that Maslow's, I don't even know if they're aware of it, but Maslow's hierarchy has 5 levels, and the top is self-actualization, right? So they move to level 2 and they look down on level 1 and they go like, okay, I'm not there.
But security is not something that really anybody has in Pakistan. So part of you is always stuck there. Like even the really, really, really rich people, even when they're traveling with, armed gunmen, like they can be shot by their own guards. Yeah, and that's what happened, I think, with the governor of Punjab or something. Exactly. Yeah. So, I feel like I came back a little more empathetic towards Pakistani people after this trip, and what I saw, and security really is a big thing there. When I was there for 10 days, and there were 4 terrorist attacks in the 10 days that I was there, Yeah. So I get that safety and security are big issues. But at the same time, I don't think those are excuses for not confronting some of the very problematic aspects of our culture that, when I lived in Pakistan, safety and security were there. 20 years ago, the terrorism and stuff was not a big issue. But these issues with women and abuse and neglect, these were still there. So these are not problems that exist just because we don't have safety in Pakistan. These have existed before our current political climate. Yeah, well, I mean, we've had a terrible political climate since the beginning of the country, right? It's only gotten progressively worse. But yeah, I think also religion plays a large role in that, right? Like you introduce religion, like a really stifling, oppressive, nitpicky, OCD kind of system to control every aspect of your existence. And it's just a really toxic mix, right? Poverty, lesser education, and religion on top of that. Yeah. Religion, yeah. So even the people that break out of the poverty and have some form of security, I guess, they still have this religious barrier, right? Religion is always a virtue. It's always glamorized, and it has so many backwards aspects to it that you can't fully self-actualize under that, especially if it's as potent as Islam is in Pakistan, right?
And it's gotten worse now. When I was there, I remember, you never really saw women in niqabs or burqas. That was not a common thing to see in Pakistan. That was, even a woman in a hijab was kind of like, okay, there's a woman in a hijab over there. Like you noticed it, it was not a very common sight to see. I think historically Pakistan has had a liberal interpretation of Islam, but that has changed in the last couple of decades. And when I was there this time, there were so many women in full face coverings and head coverings. And another thing I saw was a lot of houses and new buildings and developments had Allah written on them.
Oh, I remember the houses always having these like calligraphy things.
Yeah, that was not common. Like when I was growing up in Pakistan, that was not a common thing where you wrote religious scripture.
That seems also to be a result of some kind of like nouveau riche attitude, like gaudy, like Donald Trump, like desire to showcase how religious you are, even though on the inside you might be like, dealing heroin or whatever. Your house on the outside,
trafficking prostitutes, and
right. Your house on the outside will have these golden Quranic ayahs, that are like studded with gems or whatever, just to show that you are this pious family. Inside, who knows what you're doing.
And it's not just houses anymore. Like when I was there, it was buildings, it was office buildings, it was new development that had a whole bunch. And that was very strange for me because that's not the Pakistan that I remember. I definitely felt that Pakistan this time around, I went after, close to 2 decades, had become a lot more conservative and religious. And it was sad. It was unfortunate to see that because the culture is being muddled with the religion, and it's unfortunate to see that.
Yeah, it's getting worse and worse because of Saudi influence, right? Like
yes.
That has been imported over there, and the Sufi culture declines. And
not just Saudi influence. The people I spoke with, they're like, the nouveau riche, as you were saying. Now what the nouveau riche do is they get jobs in the Middle East. They go to Dubai or they go to Oman or Qatar or Kuwait, and over there they see, this more extreme variety of Islam, and they come back and they bring it back with them. So
right.
you're absolutely right that this is something that the nouveau riche is sort of, it's being driven by that socioeconomic demographic of people who have come out of poverty but are not exactly rich. They are intellectually still in poverty, but they have the ability to go out of Pakistan as far as the Middle East and kind of bring that culture back with them and practice it in Pakistan. So
yeah.
It's a very specific set of conditions.
Yeah. We went off on a bit of a tangent there, but back to your trip with your mom, or I mean, you were her sober guide through that, yes. Right? So tell me more about how did she react when it hit her? How did it start? How does a Pakistani mother react on shrooms?
She wasn't. I had to ask questions. Her thoughts were. I don't know your listeners how many people have done shrooms or if they're aware of what happens, but it's a lot of. And every drug is different, and every person reacts differently to different drugs. But in my personal experience, and I think my mother's experience echoed this, was that whatever you're feeling inside, whatever emotions you're harboring or suppressing or not allowing to come up, they will find a way up on mushrooms. And that's what I had always experienced when I took mushrooms. And that's what happened with my mom. Her grief actually was not about my dad. It was about her childhood and her own family and her mother and her father. And I think it's understandable why she didn't express a lot of grief for my father. He had been dead a couple of years at this point. And, he was an abusive alcoholic. And I don't think she was really sad that he died. I think she was just sad that she had lost purpose in life. That's what her sadness was being driven by. It wasn't really at losing my father. But then when she did start speaking and opening up, a lot of her sadness came from her childhood. And that's something that I realized my mother had never dealt with, the sort of sexual abuse that she had experienced at her house as a teenager, what had happened to her when her father died, and how she was treated, how she was not wanted, she was neglected. A lot of her sadness was from there. And I just realized, I'm like, has my mom been harboring this for her whole life? She was 50 when we, had this conversation, we did this thing. And I'm like, she got married when she was 21. Mm-hmm. So I'm like, I couldn't help but think, have you been carrying this in you for the last 30 years, And that was, it was eye-opening. And I realized that my mom's probably not the only one.
Yeah.
A lot of our parents have never really dealt with the trauma that they experienced growing up in that, very difficult culture. It's not an easy culture to grow up in. And a lot of and I realized that my father probably suffered from that as well. I became a lot more empathetic towards him after seeing what my mother had to deal with. And, my father grew up in poverty, and he had his own issues with his family, and, you know, neglect was definitely at play. And then in that you throw in toxic masculinity, where you're a man and you don't feel anything, and, you know, you don't talk about what makes you sad. You know, I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to excuse my father's behavior. What he did was, you know, what he did to me and my mom, it was horrible. But you end up understanding why so many of our men become like this. You know, they have no avenue for expressing anything other than anger and the drive to make money and to be successful. And I understood these things about my father after talking to my mom and seeing what she had to deal with. I have no doubt that my father had his own, you know, bag of crap that he had to deal with that he never did, you know. He died with all that in him. You know, my father died, he was drunk and he fell down the stairs and he broke his neck and he died.
Oh my gosh.
Yeah. So
wow.
I have no doubt in my mind that my father was also suffering a lot internally, but he had no way of letting that, you know, letting somebody help him, letting somebody connect with him. And I think it was the first time in my life that I felt bad for my dad, you know, after talking to my mom.
So how was he, like, who found him? Like, that must have been
he was at a party, so he wasn't at our house. So he was at somebody else's house, and it was like 4 or 5 a.m. in the morning, and he stumbled into their house totally drunk, and he took a step down and he slipped, and he just broke his neck and he died on contact. And the police came to our house.
Like on the outside of their house or on the inside?
Inside. And his body was found by the daughter of the family. So she was like 15 when she found his body. And you know, I had never really processed any of my father's death or his life prior to speaking to my mom in that way. And it helped me see just how much suffering our parents have unnecessarily gone through, and they pass that trauma and suffering on to their children. And that's something that bothers me. I understand that they are a product of their generation, they're a product of their time, and, you know, what happened to them is very unfortunate. It's sad, but I don't think that their trauma should be transferred on to the next generation, because our people, so to speak, we're never going to be able to, you know, match our potential to do, you know, real great things in life and in the world if we don't address how this cultural, religious, you know, practices they don't just influence the generation that lived through it, they influence the next generation and potentially the generation after that as well. And the reason I wrote that article was to kind of bring to light that we need to, you know, not just my generation, but our parents' generation, we need to accept that this is what we were handed in life, and it's unfortunate, but we need to deal with it. We can't just pretend like it doesn't exist, because we hurt ourselves and we hurt each other, and we hurt our future by not confronting these issues.
Right. I mean, that's one of the reasons why I started my blog about sexuality in Pakistan as well, because I mean, there's just so much repressed. It's not even just about sexuality. Like, as you said, people in our culture are carrying around so many feelings because they are not allowed to just express themselves, right? Like, even just the arts are not something that's encouraged, even by people who are interested in the arts, you know, like I've seen people who've been in my family who've been told by their parents that not to waste time on whatever it is, music, acting, whatever. And I'm like, but you're
doctor, lawyer, engineer.
Yes.
That's it.
And I'm like, but your dad did that to you. So if anything, you should understand.
Yeah. But they don't.
They just repeat that cycle. So.
Yeah. So to think that, it's just this generation that's living through it, the next generation will be better. Yeah, the next generation will be a little better. But in the globalized world that we're living in, I see this in Pakistani-Canadians here in Canada who have, they understand something is fundamentally wrong in our culture, is fundamentally wrong with us and the way we operate. but they can't do anything about it. They see how free and open life can be because we live in Canada, but when they go home, when they go to their parents, they're not allowed to live that life.
Well, yeah, many people live that double life, but I mean, also many people don't. So for example, me and my family, we're pretty close, and I've never really had secrets from them. They've always known when, I've questioned religion. We openly debate stuff, and so I'm very fortunate that way, but my husband's family,
like that.
Yeah, my husband's family is much more conservative, and he's had to just shield certain aspects of his life from his family, and that can get to be a pretty lonely existence, right? Because your family doesn't know who you are, and it's frustrating for me to see, I guess, because I come from a privileged background where I've never had to hide who I am. Mm-hmm. So, and I've seen many people, like cousins, just they can't fully be honest with their families. So I struggle with that a bit. I'm like, just do it. Just rip the Band-Aid off. This is how we make change, right?
Yeah. People don't realize that this double life, people think that this is confined to, just with my parents. But it's not. This flows over into every aspect of our lives when we get married, when we have partners, when we fall in love, because we've learned to always hide a part of ourselves or to always lie about a part of ourselves. We bring those practices into our other relationships as well. So people might say, I just lived this double life for my parents, but without realizing, you could be taking aspects of that lying and that deceitful behavior into your marriage, for example, or into your relationship with your friends or with your coworkers. And it's very hard to kind of pinpoint that because you've become used to that. You've become used to being this, other
See, person. I don't see it as like a pattern of deceitful behavior. I see more like it's just this one circumstance under which people feel pressured, but then they see like everywhere else they can be free. So they tend to be like much more open, but then all of a sudden closed off around their families, right? So it's not really like, obviously different types of people exist. So I don't want to say that nobody carries this pattern around, but from what I see like a relief of getting away from that when you have an opportunity.
And I just want to make it known. People like they message me about this, that I'm like, I'm making generalization or something. Of course, I understand that not every single Pakistani person is like this. I don't think everybody my mom's age has suffered through trauma. I don't think that. Of course not. I'm just making an observation based on overwhelming numbers of cases that I have seen. I was there in Pakistan and I met my mom's family, and I saw that my mom's not the only one who's gone through the shit that she told me about. Like there's other siblings in her family, and her family at large who've gone through that as well. My dad's family has gone through their own bag of crap. So I'm not trying to say that every single person is like this. And that's something that a lot of people, they say that that's what I'm saying, but I'm not. So I just want to make it known. I understand that there are exceptions. Aina's family clearly is more liberal than generally what we would expect from Pakistani families. And there are quite a few of those, but they're not in the majority. They're absolutely. They're a very small minority.
Yeah. So, I consider myself lucky to have that. But so I guess that's why I struggle to understand a lot of these, or relate rather to the regular culture, because I've just not been raised like that. Mm-hmm. And my parents have always been very open and willing to talk to me about anything. But of course, I see that, in some ways, my dad has carried his feelings around as well. So he has that as well. He lived through the partition of India. So he was a baby then. And he carries so many, not a baby, but he was maybe 6, 7, something like that. Yeah. But so he carries so many stories from that time, and he just, he doesn't talk about them. Occasionally, something will come up, and he'll say something, and he'll reveal this huge deal that we never knew he had to go through, Yeah. And I'm like, why haven't you told us that before? And my mom is like, why haven't you ever told me this before? And he's like, well, I don't know. It never came up. Yeah. And it's so weird. I could never imagine withholding such huge parts of my life story from my spouse, you know?
Yeah.
But he's taught that this is strength to just not wallow in sadness or whatever, right? So he's talked about how when him and his brothers finally got enough, because they grew up in a lot of poverty as well, leaving everything behind in India. When they grew up a bit, they got an education, and they were finally, you know, at their first jobs. They couldn't afford like food properly before that, and I guess tomatoes or something were a luxury. So he has this one story that they all went and got like a bag of tomatoes, and they cried, and they like just ate them like apples, you know, like, and I'm like, that's so sad, Dad. Like, how could you just like never share that with us, that tomatoes were such a big deal for you guys? You know?
No, I absolutely agree. And these might seem like, I don't know, these seem like these experiences make us who we are, you know, like experiencing hardship, experiencing, you know, seeing your family struggle. A lot of these experiences stay with us, but we're never allowed to acknowledge that. We're never allowed to be like, yeah, you know what? I saw a lot of suffering in my family, and that influenced me, and that shaped me, and I harbor a lot of sadness because of that. And it affects me. We're not allowed to do that, especially men. And for men, it is just like a total taboo, because it's like, oh my God, you're such a pussy. You're not talking to your wife about sadness.
Even just saying things like, I love you, right? Like, I feel like my dad has been saying that more now that he's older, like now that we're older. I don't know, but all of a sudden he's become okay with it. But when we were younger, I don't remember him like saying that much. So it's weird. Like, they do totally get trained to control their feelings. It's not even something that's probably limited to Pakistani culture, but it is a big part of that. Men are taught not to express themselves very much.
My partner, he's Indian, and it's the exact same thing that in that culture as well, where it's like, no, you know, like you can't talk, you can't cry, there's nothing you can do, you should only be focused on, you know, making money. Like, that's it, that's your focus,
that's, you know? Your worth. So,
and it's and I think eventually a lot of people, a lot of our parents, they come to these realizations later in life, you know, that they held all this in, and it affected them. I think that the decades that they don't deal with this, I think that needs to be addressed, that you can't deal with this when you're like 60 or, you know, 65, or you're, you know, like you become a grandparent, and only then are you comfortable opening up. You know, everybody deserves a chance to live a happy, fulfilling life, our parents included. And I think that we need to, you know, somehow get them to be okay with these things, so that their life can be more fulfilling for themselves. It's not for us, you know, it's not when I gave my mom these shrooms, it was, I wanted to help her, you know, I wanted to be like, I want you to have a happy life, right? I don't, this has nothing to do with me. I'm very fortunate. I've built a life for myself. I'm happy. In the things that I'm doing, but I want you to find that fulfillment in life as well. And that's a very strange concept for a lot of the older generation.
So do you think that she has changed since? Like, do you think she's been more open to just expressing her feelings or something, or has it had any impact on her or on your relationship since you guys did this together?
Yeah, and I didn't write about this, but my mom and I, this is not the first time. This is not the only time that we did it. This was the first time, and you know, we've done microdosage every few months afterwards, where, you know, she'll take a little bit and then she'll talk, and you know, whatever she wants to talk about, whatever's on her mind, because again, she's 50. I don't think we can go through her whole life in like one, you know, shroom trip. So we do this quite regularly, and our relationship has definitely improved. 7 or 8 months after she took these shrooms, she was like, my family and I, we have a WhatsApp group, and we message each other.
Oh yeah, we do too.
and she goes in there, she's like, I want to take a vacation with all my children. Okay. And that's very strange, because that's not something my mom ever said, you know.
That's sweet.
Like, so the fact that she was comfortable expressing that she wants to do something that she wants to do, not because she's required to or somebody's asking her to or she thinks she should do that. It's something that's coming from her and that she's comfortable saying that. That was a big thing. And we were all like, okay, Mom, where do you want to go? She's like, I want to go to Iceland. And we're like, okay. The thing is that you can't just like give your mom shrooms and be like, okay, Mom, I helped you address your issues. Now go live your life. They're going to need a lot of help, you know, like Mom, she's going to need a lot of help. So when she opened up, she's like, this is what I want. My siblings and I, we weren't like, oh, I'm sorry, I'm busy, I can't, it's like, no, we had to show to her that this was important to us, that we valued that this is what she wanted, that this was important to us. Mm-hmm. So we all, we're like, okay, we took our time off work. My sister, she was in school. She like managed that. And it might not seem like a big deal to, especially white families who do this like very easily, but to a brown family, this is like a big deal. Like, your parent is telling you that they want to do something with you because it's coming from their heart. You need to pay attention to that. You need to give that a lot of value because that's not something that happens very easily.
Yeah, I mean, where, hugs are, not as frequent, where I love yous are kind of frowned upon, this kind of thing becomes very, very valuable. So
yes, when she did that, when she opened up, we were all like, okay, yes, we're doing this. We're gonna make this happen. So if we had been like, oh, Mom, I'm sorry, she would have been discouraged. She would have been like, what's the point of being comfortable and expressing all this if I'm just gonna be met with resistance and no, you know?
So you guys took her to Iceland?
Yeah, we all went to Iceland in June last year. And when we came back, she was like, oh, I would like to have a family vacation every year if you guys want. And we're like, okay, done. We'll go on a family vacation every year. So this year we're going to Oshiega for our family vacation in Montreal.
Very cool. So you basically have rekindled your relationship with your mom over shrooms.
A big part of that, yes. Shrooms and not just shrooms, but also
to the kids listening, don't do drugs and don't do drugs with your mom.
I didn't write this to be like give your parents drugs whether they want it or not.
Right.
I just wanted to reveal
this is just your experience.
How much it takes for our parents to open up.
For sure.
Is not an easy thing for them, and it's not an easy thing for us. And this is what, unfortunately, it took for me and my mother to kind of connect on this level. I'm not saying everybody's going to have to do this to connect with their parents, but this is what it took for me. And I wouldn't be surprised if a lot of people feel challenged connecting with their parents. And
I said, my dad, he doesn't talk much about his, difficult past that he's had in terms of, poverty and leaving everything behind in a country that was home to him. But it does take a lot. It takes a lot for them to open up. And I haven't experienced that with my mom. I'm very fortunate. She is the most expressive and bubbly person ever. So I don't think I'll need shrooms for that. But I can only imagine if I did that with my dad, what would
come out?
Yeah, I don't know. So much of him is a mystery too, because he obviously went through a lot, right? Mm-hmm. There was so much violence during that period. I'm sure he saw some things that no kid should have to see.
Yeah, I think there's also, the stigma of mental health where you have to go see a therapist or a psychiatrist or, it's like, oh, I'm not crazy, okay? I don't need to go talk to no counselor or therapist. There's so much preventing us and our families from really opening up. Like, there's really nothing that encourages us to open up. Everything is discouraging. I
think the new generation of people can make that change happen. I mean, you see it happening slowly. Yeah. Some changes in Pakistani TV shows, the storylines are slightly more progressive. Some more arts and theater being celebrated there. These little things, they matter, they matter so much. And I know we're speaking as two very privileged Pakistanis who have seriously no idea what 90% of the country lives in. For them, theater and the arts is like a far cry from their reality. So for that, I don't know what we can do to change life for majority of Pakistanis like that. Like, I mean, everything's just so bad.
Yeah, it is.
The school education is so bad. Like, that would be the first thing to make a difference. Like, if we could just stop having, like, insanely corrupt politicians that just take taxpayer money and pocket it all the time, then
put
we
it
could...
in Panama.
Yeah, it's just...
The one where I was staying at my uncle's house, and he had a female housekeeper, and her brother... Well, she was about my age, maybe a little older. And she had a young brother. He was, I think, 10 or 11 years old. And he went to government schooling. You know, like, these are poor people. You know, there's servants. And he came over one day, and, you know, I was home, and I spoke to him. I'm like, hey, you know, so what do you study in school? What class are you in? And he's like, he was younger than 10. He was like 9 years old, I think. He was in grade 3. And I'm like, so what are you studying? And he's like, I study Urdu and Islamia.
Yeah.
And that's it. And like, you don't study anything else? You don't study science or like geography or history? He's like, no. And it's like, okay, that's so just literally religion.
And how sad is it that that's not limited to Pakistan? Over here in Canada, these Al-Huda cult schools, right?
God,
they are programming women to want to pull their kids out of regular school. And I've seen this happen with a relative. She has pulled out her kids of normal school, and this is legal to do, and she's put them in like Islamic private school, which teaches like basically nothing except for Islam and some kind of whatever class is thrown in there just to satisfy whatever boxes they need to tick, right? Like, so I think they told me that it was 10 to 13-year-olds that were in the same math class.
Like,
I mean, that's it's insane. This is in Canada.
And this increased after the sex ed curriculum went live, I think 2 years back. I think the Muslim schools were like maxed out, put their kids in, because everybody wanted to take their kids out of public school and put it in Islamic school, because heaven forbid we teach our kids about sex and masturbation and contraception.
Yeah, but there were so many misconceptions and hysteria spread around that sex ed curriculum too. Like, just total utter bullshit. They were like telling, you know, like Urdu and Arabic, like notes going around the community saying that your kids will be taught how to masturbate. Like, there'll be masturbation classes teaching them how to touch themselves. Like, this is utter bullshit, you know?
I read about some of that. I actually couldn't read the whole thing because it would make me angry.
Yeah.
Right? It would physically get me like, oh my God, like, what the fuck is going on, man? You know, like, Sorry, listeners.
No, it's okay.
I get a little angry when I think about these things.
Well, yeah, and I mean, my own book caused a lot of anger. I don't know if you ever read you read it, right?
I did. That's how I actually found out about you, when all the controversy regarding your book.
Yeah. There was so many angry parents in Canada about just like a very simple book about love.
Yeah.
Just because there's two dudes in love, and that's just not acceptable if they're set in Pakistan.
Yeah.
So
no, it's definitely there's a lot of work to be done, and the only thing I would say that maybe might encourage people to put in the work and try to address these issues is that we are going to inherit all this trauma and all these issues if we don't deal with them. Like, if our parents went through this and the way they raised us and the way they taught us about life, it was directly influenced by their experiences living in that country, in that culture, and we are the recipients of all of that. So if we don't take a step up and say this, we have to address this, we are going to have to cycle through this sort of this lifestyle as well, and we're ultimately going to be the ones who suffer. So it's a lot of work, but if we don't decide to address it, we're going to be the ones who are going to have to pay the price for it.
Right. You just have to confront the issues, and people trying to do that are getting so much opposition, right?
Yes.
Even from the Western left and the Western right, just trying to co-opt them. Like, there's just a mess on all sides. There's no way someone like you or me speaking about these issues will get taken seriously if the Trumpians keep trying to use us to further like a hateful narrative, right?
Yeah.
And then the left will be triggered into further denial and further denial.
Yeah.
So we're just screwed either way. Yeah. I don't know how we break that cycle, but you have to basically earn the trust of the people to show that we're not just right-wing mouthpieces. And it doesn't help when someone goes along and becomes a right-wing mouthpiece. Yeah. So that's why Muslims that vote Trump or ex-Muslims that go far right, those people I find are really, really muddying the water for everyone trying to speak on these issues. I remember you talking to me as well, how you accidentally gave an interview with a Trump supporter.
I was like, oh my God, what have I done? I didn't know he was a Trump supporter. I researched him afterwards. I'm like, oh my God, I hope nobody listens to that interview.
So he tried to get you to
say how amazing Trump's book was and how pragmatic the Bible was.
Oh, good Lord.
We were live, and I'm like, oh my God, you're a Trump supporter? Like, I had that realization when he asked me that question, and I was just like, I haven't read Trump's book, so I don't know.
Dear.
Which is the truth. I haven't read either of those books. But
surely you know they're full of shit.
But yeah, no, that was an experience. But yeah, a lot of the stuff is more right wingers are open to these things than left wingers.
Yeah, but that's for all the wrong reasons, right?
Yes, exactly. So, it's to further their agenda. Like, see, we're right. All these people are barbarians, and we should ban them from coming into our country. Like, that's their agenda.
Exactly. So the people that get seduced by the welcoming of the right, the welcomeness of the right.
Yeah.
I find are just making it harder for everyone to get taken seriously ultimately, because what needs to be shown is that no, this isn't like a hate-driven agenda. This is an actual bunch of problems that needs to be addressed rationally, calmly, and without any like bigotry or whatever involved. But we cannot make that impact until people among us are going with the Fox News, because that's the easier route. Yeah. You know?
Yeah. They're getting their platform. They're being heard. They don't care, who they're kind of going to, as long as they get to say what they want and people agree with them. They're happy. And I have to admit, that is very tempting.
It is tempting. Of course, that's the path to success, but that's not the path to like whatever financial success and more popularity. It's not success in the sense of actually getting this message across.
Yeah.
I mean, this is just handing a gift to like the Reza Aslans of the world who want to point at so-called, Muslim reformers and say, oh, look, they're just crazy Trump voters, or ex-Muslims and say, oh, look, they just, they work with... Informants. Pardon?
They're native informants. That's like a big thing.
Native informants, exactly. Yeah. So this just helps people discredit us. So
yeah, I completely agree. And in my opinion, I think as much as it would be great that the left were to kind of support us and give us a platform for these things, I think what needs to happen is like more regular people from our communities need to start getting involved, because I see a lot of them as just bystanders. They're just like, I'm just doing what my parents taught me, and I don't want to have any, I don't want to cause any ripples. Whatever. I just want to sit and practice my religion, and I don't really want to do anything,
But that's the thing. You have to be a representative. This is why your article caught my attention, because I think it's great to highlight stories about Muslims, Pakistanis, ex-Muslims, whatever, that are outside of the awful norm, like, of extremism or whatever. I thought this story about you sharing a moment with your mother or bonding over hallucinogenic drugs is just such a unique little different Pakistani story, So the people need to come forward and just show the diversity amongst us. I think that would be great, so that we can stop being conflated with the orthodox hijabi Muslims all the time. There's so much diversity in our culture as well.
Absolutely. And I think this tendency to just be bystanders and just be like, oh, we're not gonna get involved, this again is part of our culture. We're not really encouraged to take on leadership roles. We're not really encouraged to think deeply about issues and see how they affect us and our community at large. We're just told to keep our head down and just follow and just do what our parents say and just do what society expects and just become a doctor or an engineer, and that's it. Why do you have to think about more than what is necessary? And I think regular Pakistanis, regular Muslims, regular ex-Muslims, they need to get more involved and have their voices heard. So it's not just, we're not seen as like this fringe group of people who are just, trying to get noticed.
Exactly. So, we just need more voices. Even just the gender roles are so strict in our culture, right? Like how you said about your mother, you said, she explains how she could never leave my father because without him, we wouldn't have had the lifestyle that his money could provide. Her family wasn't willing to support her. Her mother thought it would bring shame upon the family if her daughter got divorced with 2 young children, and that no one would marry my mother afterwards. So without any financial resources, a job, or help from her own family, my mother decided the only option was to rough it out with my dad, a 25-year, mostly sexless marriage. She was just in it to give her kids the resources she knew she couldn't provide them on her own. Now, this is a common story. Like, I've heard this time and time again from my blog. I've heard it even from my relatives. Like, a few people I can think of that are probably just married because for the kids, and I don't even think that's healthy for the kids, to be honest.
That's not. Trust me, as a child who was raised in a house like that, it messes you up, really does.
Yeah.
So when you say, I'm in it for my kids, you're probably doing your kids more harm. Like psychologically, you're messing them up. Physically, you might be able to provide them like a big car or a nice house, but psychologically, it messes them up. Trust me, I know.
I mean, 2 unhappy parents is just not a good way of parenting.
No.
So, I mean, we need to break down these taboos and barriers and just the idea that a woman's identity is tied to her marital status or her motherhood status, Like, without being married, she's nothing. Who will marry her again? How do we tackle this stuff without being sensitive, without being tribal? Like, I know that a lot of people have attacked me for writing on these topics because I'm not, Pakistani enough. Because I don't live there. So they feel that I'm not entitled to an opinion about my motherland. And shit like that is what really holds us back, I feel, right? Even if it's someone who lived there, like someone like Malala, for instance, she freaking got shot in the head. If she criticizes something, they're like American puppet. So...
Because nobody really wants to think deeply about themselves. Nobody wants to look inwards. It's always easier to point a finger to somebody else and say, oh, you're the one who's messed up, not me. So why do I have to think about my actions? And it's really toxic, I people, when they get out of this, they just wash their hands off of it. They're like, I don't want to deal with this bullshit anymore. I'm going to live my life and I'm going to be happy. And I don't blame them for that, because these are not easy issues to tackle. There's issues around, education, religion, poverty, gender roles. There's so much, and it's all mixes together to give us this toxic mix that we see manifested in our parents or the older generations or in us. And so I understand why a lot of people who leave that part of the world or leave that lifestyle are like, I don't give a shit, like I'm okay.
Yeah, and then they're seen as, traitors as well for not being in the thick of it, right? Like, oh, you left us behind, you don't get to complain.
Yes.
So... There's
no winning. Yeah.
There's no winning. Yeah. And I mean, even just a concept like love, right? It's so taken for granted over here that you're going to end up being with someone that you love. You like, right? You're going to marry someone because you love them, or people are just expected to marry at a certain age in Pakistan. Arranged marriages still happen, and they may have changed, like from back in the day where you'd only get to see your spouse like on your wedding night or whatever, and now I guess it's become more like, oh, your parents will introduce you, and
it's
then
semi-arranged.
You get to hang out. Wow, thank you so much for allowing them to hang out with each other before they
go on a date or something. You know, hold hands.
So I mean, so that's why there's so many probably loveless marriages. You don't really get to know, like, of course, there's so many people in Pakistan that fall in love. I'm not saying that there aren't. But there's so much controversy surrounding it. Like, I mean, my own marriage, right? Like, and we weren't even in Pakistan, but I've written about this on my blog before. Not from my family's end, but as I mentioned, my in-laws are conservative. They weren't such huge fans of me. And they, you know, they're still not years later. There's so many things about me that are just so too untraditional, right? Tattoos, piercings, lack of religiosity. It's just, I'm the worst ever deal. The worst ever package. So, I mean, love often comes with like huge Romeo and Juliet type of dramatic stories, right? Not always, but I've seen a few in my family with drama, and, you know, like either it's someone's the wrong sect, or people have to be brought around and they have to be reconciled, and it's never easy.
I went through that too.
Oh, did you?
I went through that too. Yeah. So my partner, I've been with him for 6 years now, and he's an ex-Hindu Indian, you know. But I think in our culture, there's no such thing as an atheist. You know, nobody recognizes atheism. It's either a Christian or a Hindu or whatever.
My mom gets confused too. My mom is like, what do you mean? Like, are you a secret Christian? Like, she's not angry or anything. She just doesn't understand how you can not have
no new religion.
It just does not compute.
So my partner, like, he was raised Hindu, but he's an atheist like myself. And to my mom, that was just, she couldn't compute, you know, like, so she's like, oh, so he's a Hindu. I'm like, no, he's not, you know. Okay, so if he's not a Hindu, you know, he's too dark. You know,
oh my gosh, really?
I'm very fair skinned, and this is like, you know, 6 years ago when I introduced him to my mom, when my dad was still alive as well, and my dad had similar things to say about him.
About his skin color?
Yeah,
like, it's so funny because I feel that a lot of people that are outside of the culture are not aware of the shadism.
Racism. I mean, I'm sorry, it's just flat out racism that we have in our culture. It's like about different shades within the same race. So I don't think people understand how racist and discriminatory minorities can be. You know, like how much in Pakistan, how much the Sunni sect hates the Ahmadiyya sect and the Shia sect, and that we don't give them rights, that we don't let them pray in the same mosques as us, you know? Like, well,
the Ahmadis, I mean, we have to sign something on our passport denouncing them from the religion before we're allowed to get a passport.
Exactly. And people don't realize how much discrimination there is in minorities, and there's just this focus on, only white people are racist, everybody else is good.
I think minorities are romanticized, in the West at least, however.
They were just pure, you know, we're just oppressed and we just want rights, and, you know, we wouldn't do anything bad to anyone else. Nothing could be further from the truth. You just need to go to our countries and see how we treat our religious minorities over there to see how much discrimination.
But those are two different contexts, right? So within the context of the West, I don't think like Muslims have the power to oppress people outside of their own group.
Yes.
Of course, they oppress other Muslims, they oppress gay Muslims, they oppress ex-Muslims. And until the non-Muslim bigots, the anti-Muslim bigots, stop co-opting our voices, we will never be heard from within, because then it becomes a numbers game. Because yes, they are actually oppressing Muslims as a whole. They are discriminating against them. They are, you know, shooting up at mosques. They are pulling off women's hijabs. So then our voices get lost within that.
Yeah.
And I'm not saying that's fair, but I'm just saying that that becomes the larger discriminatory problem that is visible.
Yes.
And so how do we tackle everything? We have to make sure we're not giving bait to the people who want to discriminate against Muslims as a whole. Mm-hmm. We're not giving them our voices.
Yeah. I think what I see is that in the West, Muslims are only comfortable being victims. They're not comfortable seeing themselves as perpetrators. Like, they're like, oh, I'm not like, we Muslims, we've not done anything bad to anybody ever.
Absolutely.
We're victims,
it's such a blind spot, right?
Yeah.
They never see the problem within themselves.
Yes.
And even not getting something as small as a full unopened Coke can becomes the hugest Islamophobic story, right?
Yeah.
Meanwhile, they'll be like openly like, oh, I don't want to hire you because you're gay or whatever, right? Like, or you can't marry this person because he's too dark, or
And I think my biggest problem with the left is that they allow this behavior where Muslims say we are only victims, not perpetrators, and the left is like, yeah, that's right. There, you are only victims, and all the laws that we write have to kind of cater to you, you know, because you can't do anything wrong. And I agree. Over here, there is a lot of, you know, anti-Muslim bigotry and what happened in Quebec City. You know, it's all terrible. I'm not saying that is right or that should happen, but it's a very, very thin line to walk where it's like, yes, you are on the end where you're receiving hate, but you are also on the end that
where you're
is giving
dishing it out. Yeah.
Yes. You have to accept that other part of yourselves, which Muslims do not want to do, and the left has enabled them.
But you know who else enables them, right? The right enables them. The right enables them by making martyrs and victims out of them, like legitimately. So that way, then there's no need. Like, there's always something to point to. Oh, well, look at that guy. You know, he pulled this person's hijab off. So how can we discuss how hijabs are, you know, oppressing women? Let's first, you know, protect hijabi. So it becomes this contest, and obviously numbers will win out. The numbers of the regular conservative Muslims are larger.
Yes.
So it's become such a complicated problem under Trump. Like, all the things you're saying about the left, I completely and wholeheartedly agree with. And not under Trump, it felt more comfortable to press the left on.
Oh, yeah. Because now it's like, if you say shit about Muslims, you're giving into the Islamophobia that is rampant under Trump, and you know you're making the situation worse. And
the anti-Muslim bigotry.
Yes, yeah. So it's like I said, I understand why a lot of people in our community just don't want to get involved in these.
I know, it's such a mess.
Yeah, it is. It's like, where do you start? Where do you know? How can you have an impact? It's very difficult. But I think that's the only way we'll get our voices heard, if more of us are comfortable speaking up about this. That's the only way.
Yeah, and remaining principled.
Yeah, not being like, oh man, Fox News is giving me 30 minutes. Okay, fine, I'll take it.
Yeah.
All the Twitter followers I'll have. I'll be honest, you know, like I don't have a lot of Twitter followers, and it's so tempting to see people who have like, oh man, so many Twitter followers, and it's like, so I just need to like say some inflammatory stuff and, you know, like get some, that's it. I thought,
just be like, Islam sucks.
Islam sucks,
500 retweets.
Exactly.
Or then compare it with the, anti-Muslim bigotry also sucks. Like, silence.
Yes, exactly. And it's like, oh man, there's doing the quote unquote right thing, you're not gonna win any popularity.
No way, because it sucks to do the right.
It does.
It's a lonely path, right? Because you're just you're not going the easy route, and the left is just not helping you. They're constantly getting in the way of you speaking out and trying to silence you, but you know that you have to get through to them and not the right, because So
it's a long fight that needs to be, fought.
It's a long fight that requires a lot of diverse voices. Some practicing Muslims also. Not everyone has to stop being defensive. The more you protect Islam from any critique, even well-meaning critique, the more you empower the bigots. For sure, because they then get inflamed that nobody is addressing this, and then they start to swoop in and address it from all the wrong angles.
Yeah.
And it's just a vicious cycle. And then when the bigots become bigger and their voices become louder, then the left becomes more motivated to stay silent and refuse to address any criticisms with Islam, because this is now a group that's for real being victimized. So
yeah, what do you do? So I just want to thank you for, giving my voice a more elevated platform, for being heard, having me on your show and talking about my article, which I think, I think this conversation that we led down on, Islam and the left and the right and all that stuff, I think this is inevitable when you talk about, issues facing our communities, whether it's, not being able to express our feelings or women not having the same sort of rights as men, because this is all connected. This is all part of one big mess.
Yeah.
So even though we wanted to talk about my article, I think it's inevitable that we would have ended up talking about these issues.
Yeah, there's so many tangents that come from it, right? I'm just gonna leave with one more quote from your article where you talk about your mom. Yeah. She recognizes how she built her entire identity on being a mother and providing my siblings and I all the resources she could for us to succeed. And that's partly why she's so lost now. We're all grown up and living our own lives, and she's left to figure things out on her own once again. Now, I mean, I'm sure this is a thing that like many mothers experience, but it becomes heightened in this context when you're a Pakistani woman whose main worth is like being a wife and mother, right? When you're left being neither of those actively, she's obviously still your mother, but she's not. Yeah. She doesn't need to provide for us, like cook for us and tell us who to marry and, like iron our clothes or do our laundry, which is really sad when you think about. Like that's her purpose of being. Exactly. Yeah. It's like, that's what it is. That's what it means to you to be a mother. Like, what about the emotional needs that we have from our mom? We want to talk to you. We want to share with you. We want you to share in our happiness. But that's like, no, I need to be doing something more tangible than that to be a mother. We also have a lack of hobbies. If you notice in the older generation of Pakistanis, they just don't have hobbies. Yes. They don't have any extracurriculars unless it's like cricket or whatever. Or watching TV. Watching TV is a great hobby. But there's like very little, I don't know, writing, drawing, photography. Reading, like it's unfortunate. It's like there's so much a human life has potential to accomplish, and we don't even try to tap into it. It's just like, nope, you had a couple of kids and that's it, potential achieved. Yeah, I'm sure I'm going to get some emails after this saying, well, what are you talking about? My parents read a lot. Yes, so do mine. My parents read a lot. Again, I can't give a disclaimer. I'm not talking about every single Pakistani family, just the majority as I see it. Yes, there's some serious work to be done. Yes. And you took a step with Shrooms. But we all do what we got to do, man. That's what I had to do. So props to your mom, man. She's cool for giving that a shot. I mean, I probably would be too freaked out, and I'm like much younger than your mother, and I don't know. The idea of Shrooms freaks me out, but yeah. I think she didn't have any baggage, she didn't really know anything about them. So she had no like, oh, I hear people freak out on them. She had absolutely no idea what happened. So she didn't really go in expecting a certain experience. She just had the most organic experience in my mind that she could have had without any judgment or preconceived notions about what happens on Shrooms. And I think that's the best way to do it. And you talk about her like, noticing colors and stuff, and it's really kind of cute. Like she's like, has this guy always been this blue? And that guy's shoes are so red. And it's just like, that would make a cute movie. Maybe someday. Yeah. Any directors listening, get in touch with me. Yeah. We can make this happen. Like, can you imagine like Hum TV drama on this? Like, that'd be great. That'd be my mom would get like death threats. Seriously. She'd be like, what have you gotten me into? I didn't sign up for this. Yeah. I had to ask for her consent before publishing that article. Vice was like,
content before we publish this. So she had to read this and,
Well, that's obviously, that's great that you did. That's the ethical thing to do. So I'm glad that she read it and she approved it. And, she didn't freak out that your full name is out there. Like, what will her friends think if they see it, or no?
So, no, she was, I was like, I think she understands that, like, I don't think anybody in her circle is going to really come across this. I think she understands that. And I asked her, I'm like, if someone does read it, how would you feel? And she thought about it. She was like, I wouldn't really feel any which way because this is the truth, So she thought about what would happen if somebody she knows actually read it. And she's like, well, this is a part of me that, nobody really knows about, and they know about it, and that's that, She didn't really go like, I'd be embarrassed or I'd be ashamed,
It's funny because you said your brother, you didn't want your mom tripping while he was around because he can be a bit judgmental about people taking intoxicants, including alcohol.
Yeah, he's like the goody, no drinking, like, I mean, I don't think he's like that anymore.
So has he read it?
Yeah, he has read it. Yeah, he's read it, and he's actually done shrooms with my mom and I once really? Well. Yeah, but he's a little different. I would say he's probably the most different in our family in the sense that he's probably the most traditional, where it's like, no, you shouldn't do intoxicants and, they're not good for you. And he's very jaded by the fact that my father was an alcoholic.
Oh, yeah, of course.
He doesn't want to drink because that's what alcoholism does. So, and
that absolutely makes sense for him to have grown up seeing that. And then for your father to meet such a tragic and horrible end. I mean, that could traumatize anyone.
Yeah. And I understand what my brother has gone through because I was like that as well in my early 20s. Like, I didn't start drinking till I was 23, because I was like, I'm not going to drink. Like, I had an alcoholic father. Like, you know what alcohol does? And it had nothing to do with religion. It was just seeing my father's alcoholism. So my brother, I think, he hasn't really processed a lot of his emotions around these things. Again, we were talking about how men, they're not really encouraged to do that because they're seen as weak and stuff. So my brother definitely, I think, has a little bit of that, but he's read this and I hope over time he'll be encouraged to open up about, his side of things as well. You can't push these things. You can't put someone down and be like, hey, okay, listen, we need to talk about this. You need to address this. Even though you don't want to, you need to, people need to kind of come to it on their own. So my brother knows that this door is available to him, this avenue for expressing himself, it's there. It's whenever he's ready and whenever he wants to take it, he knows me and my mom and our family will be there for him.
Yeah. I think that's important, that he just knows that he will not be considered weak and you're open to him expressing his emotions. And slowly, I think we can begin to change things by just putting our voices out there. So
yeah, I agree.
So thank you so much for coming on and talking about your article, your experiences, your observations. Thank you so much for having me.
It was awesome.
Awesome. Well, you take care and we will keep in touch.
Thank you.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Polite Conversations. You can support this podcast by sharing the shit out of it, making some noise about it, or contributing via Patreon. Patreon.com/nice mangoes. No E in mangoes. Also, you can follow me on Twitter @nicemangoes. If you want to make a one-time donation instead of a monthly Patreon one, you can do so via PayPal. nicemangoes.blog@gmail.com. Remember, no E in mangoes. If you've got an interesting story and would potentially like to be a guest, you can email me there too. A special thanks to Dylan Beck for theme music, sound, and production help.